Saint Mother Teresa, the inspiring journey from darkness to light. Hello everyone, and welcome back to English Life Stories. What if I told you that the woman who became the ultimate symbol of love and compassion started as someone who felt completely abandoned by God? What if the person who dedicated her entire life to helping the poorest of the poor actually spent decades feeling spiritually empty and alone? This isn't just the story of Mother Teresa. This is a story about finding purpose in the darkest moments. This is a story about you too. It's about discovering how your deepest pain, your greatest doubts, and your most overwhelming feelings of emptiness can become the source of extraordinary meaning. You see, every single person listening to this right now has felt lost at some point. Every person has questioned their purpose. Every person has had moments when they felt like God, the universe, or life itself had forgotten about them. Mother Teresa's story will show you exactly how to transform that spiritual darkness into pure light. So stay with me until the very end, because this story will completely change how you see your own struggles, your own calling, and your own incredible capacity to change the world. Let's begin this transformative journey together. Chapter 1. A Heart Born for Something Greater. Angeze Gongshe was born on August 26, 1910, in Skopje, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire. Today, it's the capital of North Macedonia. Angeze, which became anglicized as Agnes, means the same as the English name, while Gongshe means flower bud in Albanian. But here's something remarkable about her birth. She was born into a family that would teach her the most important lesson of her entire life. Her father, Nicola, was a successful businessman who could have focused only on making money. Instead, he opened their family home to anyone who needed help. Every evening, their dinner table was filled not just with family, but with strangers, poor people, and anyone who had nowhere else to go. Her mother, Dranophile, is credited with saying something that would echo through Agnes's entire life. "When you do good, do it quietly, as if you were throwing a stone into the sea." Little Angeze didn't understand it then, but she was watching her parents practice something that would become her life's mission. True love means giving everything, expecting nothing, and doing it all in silence. When Angeze was just 8 years old, something happened that would shatter her perfect little world and plant the seeds of her future calling. Her father died suddenly and of uncertain cause. The family never learned exactly what happened, but the loss destroyed their world. Overnight, they went from being wealthy to struggling just to survive. Her mother, Dranophile, had to work multiple jobs just to feed her children. Their big, welcoming house was sold. The dinner table that once fed many strangers could barely feed their own family. But here's what amazes me about this tragedy. Instead of becoming bitter, Dranophile made a decision that would shape Agnes forever. "We have less now," she told her children, "so we must give more of ourselves." Even when they had almost nothing, Dranophile continued helping others. She brought food to sick neighbors. She visited elderly people who were alone. She taught Agnes that poverty is not about how much money you don't have. It's about how little love you choose to give. As a teenager, Angeze felt something stirring inside her that she couldn't quite understand. She spent hours in church, not just praying, but listening for something, waiting for something. She felt like there was a voice calling her, but she couldn't hear what it was saying. At age 12, Angeze knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to become a missionary. She wanted to dedicate her entire life to serving God by serving the poorest people in the world. As she began to seriously consider religious life, Angeze started using the anglicized form of her name, Agnes, which would become her name in religious contexts and the wider world. But this decision would require the most painful sacrifice imaginable. To become a Catholic missionary, Agnes would have to leave her family forever. In those days, once you joined a religious order and traveled to a foreign mission, you would never see your family again, though letters could be exchanged for a time. Tragically, she would never see her beloved mother and sister again. They both died in the early 1970s while she continued her mission in India. When Agnes turned 18, she made the decision that would define her entire existence. She joined the Sisters of Loreto and was assigned to India, a country she had never seen, speaking languages she didn't know, to serve people who would be complete strangers. On September 26, 1928, Agnes said goodbye to her mother and her sister Aga at the train station in Skopje. They all knew they would never see each other again, though they would maintain contact through letters for a time. As the train pulled away, carrying her toward her destiny, Agnes pressed her face against the window and watched her family disappear forever. In that moment, she experienced the first taste of the spiritual darkness that would torment her for the rest of her life. Why does serving God require losing everything you love? She wondered. She had no idea that this question would haunt her for the next 50 years. Chapter 2. The Making of a Saint. Calcutta, India, 1929. Imagine stepping off a train into a world that assaults every one of your senses. The heat is suffocating. The smell is overwhelming. The poverty is unlike anything you've ever seen or could have imagined. This was Agnes's first experience of India, the country that would become her spiritual home and her greatest teacher. Agnes was assigned to teach at St. Mary's High School, a convent school for wealthy Bengali girls. For nearly 20 years, she lived behind the walls of this comfortable, safe convent. She took her religious vows and became Sister Teresa, named after Sainte Thérèse of Lisieux. Life in the convent was peaceful, predictable, and spiritually fulfilling. Sister Teresa was an excellent teacher. She learned Bengali and Hindi. She loved her students, and they loved her. But every day, something was eating away at her soul. From the convent windows, Sister Teresa could see the slums of Calcutta. She could see the endless poverty, the suffering, the people dying in the streets with no one to care for them. Every night, she lay in her comfortable bed, knowing that just outside the convent walls, thousands of people were sleeping on the ground, hungry, sick, and alone. How can I serve God from inside these safe walls, she asked herself, when God's most suffering children are dying just outside? The comfortable life that was supposed to bring her closer to God was actually making her feel further away from Him. Then, on September 10, 1946, something happened that would change not just Teresa's life, but the lives of millions of people around the world. Sister Teresa was traveling by train from Calcutta to Darjeeling for her annual retreat. As the train moved through the city, she looked out the window and saw something that broke her heart completely. A woman was dying in the street. She was skin and bones, covered in sores, and completely alone. People were walking past her as if she didn't exist. This dying woman was invisible to the world, and in that moment, Sister Teresa heard something that would revolutionize her understanding of her purpose. "She is me," a voice said inside her heart. "The poor, the suffering, the dying, they are all me in disguise. Will you serve me in them?" This was what Catholics call the call within the call. Sister Teresa had become a nun to serve God. Now God was asking her to serve Him in a completely different way. But leaving the convent to work in the slums wasn't just difficult, it was almost impossible. No Catholic nun had ever been given permission to leave her convent and work alone among the poorest of the poor. Sister Teresa spent 2 years fighting with church authorities, writing letters, and praying for permission to follow this new calling. Finally, in August 1948, she received permission to leave the convent for 1 year to work in the slums. On August 17, 1948, Sister Teresa walked out of the safe walls of St. Mary's Convent wearing a simple white sari with blue borders, the same type of sari worn by the poorest women in Bengal. She had no money, no plan, no organization, and no support. She had only her faith and her determination to serve the poorest of the poor. What happened next would test every ounce of her faith and nearly destroy her completely. Chapter 3. Into the Heart of Darkness. The slums of Calcutta in 1948 were hell on earth. Sister Teresa walked into Motijil, one of the worst slums in the city, carrying nothing but a small bag and a heart full of hope. What she found there was beyond human imagination. People living in drainage pipes. Families of 8 sharing spaces the size of closets, children covered in diseases begging for food, women giving birth on dirty streets with no medical care, men dying of tuberculosis with no medicine, no comfort, and no dignity. But the worst part wasn't the physical poverty, it was the spiritual poverty. These people had been rejected by society for so long that they believed they were worthless. They had lost all hope. Sister Teresa started with what seemed like an impossible task. She opened a school under a tree. She had no desks, no books, no supplies. She used a stick to write letters in the dirt. 5 children came the first day, then 10, then 20. But teaching wasn't enough. Every day, Sister Teresa witnessed people dying in the streets like animals. She watched mothers holding their dead babies, not knowing where to bury them. She saw old people taking their last breaths alone on sidewalks. "This is not God's will," she said to herself. "No human being should die without love." Sister Teresa began picking up dying people from the streets and bringing them to a shelter. After completing a basic nursing course with the medical mission sisters at Holy Family Hospital in Patna, she had essential medical skills, but no money for medicine and no official permission to run a hospice. But she had something more powerful than any of those things. She had love without limits. According to accounts from early volunteers, the first person she brought to her makeshift shelter was a woman who was half-eaten by rats and ants. The woman was still alive, but barely. The smell was so terrible that most people couldn't stay in the same room. Sister Teresa cleaned her wounds, fed her, and held her hand as she died. "Thank you," the woman whispered with her last breath. "For the first time in my life, I feel like a human being." In that moment, Sister Teresa understood something that would become the foundation of her entire mission. The greatest poverty in the world is not hunger, not homelessness, not disease. The greatest poverty is feeling unloved and unwanted. But this work was destroying her physically and emotionally. Sister Teresa was getting sick from the diseases around her. She was exhausted from working 18 hours a day. She was discouraged because for every person she helped, there were thousands more she couldn't reach. Worst of all, she was beginning to experience something that would torment her for the rest of her life. She was starting to feel spiritually empty. The God who had called her to this work seemed to have gone completely silent. Night after night, Sister Teresa prayed desperately for some sign that God was still with her. But she heard nothing, felt nothing. It was as if God had abandoned her in the very place He had called her to serve. "Where are you?" she cried out in her prayers. "I left everything to serve you, and now I can't feel you anywhere." This spiritual darkness would last for nearly 50 years, but somehow it would become the source of her greatest strength. Chapter 4. Birth of a Mission. In 1950, something miraculous happened. The Vatican officially recognized Sister Teresa's work and allowed her to start her own religious congregation. She called it the Missionaries of Charity, and their mission was simple but revolutionary: to serve the poorest of the poor. But Sister Teresa's definition of poorest was different from everyone else's. She wasn't just talking about people who lacked money. She was talking about people who lacked love, dignity, and hope. The poor, she said, are not just those who are hungry for bread. They are those who are hungry for love, for care, for the feeling that they belong to somebody. The Missionaries of Charity took 4 vows instead of the usual 3. Along with poverty, chastity, and obedience, they promised to give wholehearted and free service to the poorest of the poor. Sister Teresa's first major project was opening a home for dying people who had been abandoned by their families and society. She found a building next to a Hindu temple dedicated to the goddess Kali. The local priests initially resisted having a Christian nun working near their holy temple, though there are divergent historical accounts about the extent of this opposition. Sister Teresa faced this resistance with determination and practical reasoning. She demonstrated that her work served all people regardless of their faith, focusing on basic human dignity rather than conversion. Eventually, the opposition diminished as the community witnessed the genuine nature of her service. The home was called Nirmal Hriday, which means place of the Immaculate Heart. But most people knew it simply as the home for the dying. This wasn't a hospital trying to cure people. This was a place where people who had been treated like garbage their entire lives could die with dignity and love. Sister Teresa and her volunteers would go out every morning and search the streets for people who were dying alone. They would bring them to Nirmal Hriday, clean them, feed them, and simply love them. Many people died within hours of arriving, but they died knowing that someone cared about them. They died as human beings, not as discarded trash. Word about Sister Teresa's work began to spread beyond Calcutta. Volunteers from around the world started coming to help. Donations began arriving from people who had heard about her mission. But success brought new challenges that nearly broke her. The more famous Sister Teresa became, the more people expected her to be a perfect saint. They expected her to be always joyful, always peaceful, always radiating God's love. The truth was very different. Inside, Sister Teresa was struggling with doubts, depression, and a spiritual emptiness that felt like torture. She felt like a fraud, helping others find God while she couldn't feel God's presence in her own life. In her private letters to her spiritual directors, she wrote things that shocked everyone who read them. She described feeling that God had abandoned her, that the darkness was overwhelming, and that she felt unwanted and unloved. In one of her most poignant reflections, she wrote, "If I ever become a saint, I will surely be one of darkness." These letters revealed something that made Sister Teresa even more remarkable. She continued serving others with perfect love, even when she felt no love herself. She gave hope to thousands of people, even when she had no hope herself. This spiritual darkness didn't make her weak. It made her incredibly strong. It helped her understand the deepest suffering of the people she served. When she held dying people who felt abandoned by God, she knew exactly how they felt. She was abandoned too, but she chose to love anyway. Chapter 5. The World Discovers an Angel. By the 1960s, Sister Teresa's work had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. The missionaries of charity were operating homes for orphans, lepers, and dying people throughout India. In the 1980s and 1990s, they would expand to serve AIDS patients and other marginalized communities. But Sister Teresa was still relatively unknown outside of India. That changed in 1969 when a British journalist named Malcolm Muggeridge decided to make a documentary about her work. Muggeridge was a skeptical, agnostic journalist who expected to find either a fraud or a fanatic. Instead, he found something that transformed his entire understanding of human possibility. He would later convert to Catholicism in 1982, partly influenced by what he witnessed. He watched Sister Teresa pick up dying people from gutters and treat them as if they were precious treasures. He saw her organization running on almost no money, but infinite love. He witnessed miracles of compassion that couldn't be explained by any rational analysis. The documentary, called Something Beautiful for God, aired on BBC television and changed everything. Suddenly, the entire world knew about the tiny Albanian nun who was revolutionizing how people thought about service, love, and human dignity. Letters began pouring in from everywhere. Money started arriving from people who wanted to support her work. Volunteers came from every continent to serve with the missionaries of charity. But the attention also brought criticism that hurt Sister Teresa deeply. Some people accused her of trying to convert poor people to Christianity. Others said she was keeping people in poverty instead of fighting for social justice. Some critics claimed she was more interested in publicity than in helping people. The harshest criticism came from people who said that Sister Teresa's approach to poverty was naive and ineffective. "You're just putting Band-Aids on the problem," they said. "You should be fighting the systems that create poverty instead of just helping the victims." Sister Teresa's response revealed the profound wisdom of her approach. "I don't do big things. I do small things with great love. If everyone did small things with great love, there would be no need for big things." She understood something that her critics missed. You can't change the world through politics, economics, or social programs alone. You change the world one heart at a time, one person at a time, one act of love at a time. In 1979, Sister Teresa received the highest honor the world could give her. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee said, "She has taught us that love in action is service to others, and service to others is service to God." At the Nobel Prize ceremony, Sister Teresa did something that shocked everyone. Instead of giving a traditional acceptance speech, she asked the entire audience to pray with her for world peace. Then, she made a request that reflected her priorities. According to widely reported accounts, she asked for the traditional Nobel Prize banquet to be canceled so that the money could be donated to feed poor people in Calcutta. "The food would last only one night," she said, "but that money will feed hundreds of poor people for months." Even in her moment of greatest triumph, Sister Teresa was thinking about others. But behind all the fame and recognition, she was still fighting her private battle with spiritual darkness. The woman the world saw as a living saint felt more abandoned by God than ever. This contradiction would define the final chapters of her extraordinary life. Chapter 6. The Price of Sainthood. By the 1980s, Mother Teresa had become one of the most recognizable and beloved people on earth. Her missionaries of charity were operating in dozens of countries. She had opened homes for AIDS patients when no one else would touch them. She was counseling world leaders and challenging the powerful to remember the powerless. But fame came with a price that was almost unbearable. Every day, Mother Teresa received thousands of letters from people begging for help. Mothers writing about their starving children, families asking for money for medical treatment, communities requesting her to open missions in their areas. She couldn't help everyone, but every letter broke her heart. She felt like she was failing the very people she had dedicated her life to serve. The physical demands were destroying her body. Mother Teresa was traveling constantly, often sleeping only 2 or 3 hours a night. She was in her 70s, but working like someone half her age. More challenging was the emotional burden of being treated like a living saint. People expected her to be perfect, to have all the answers, to never show weakness or doubt. But Mother Teresa was human. She got frustrated. She felt overwhelmed. She questioned whether her work was making any real difference. "Sometimes I feel like my work is just a drop in the ocean," she confided to a friend. Her friend asked, "But what is an ocean but a collection of drops?" This conversation reminded Mother Teresa of something crucial. She had never been trying to solve all the world's problems. She was just trying to love one person at a time. In 1989, Mother Teresa suffered a serious heart attack. Doctors told her she needed to slow down immediately or she would die. But Mother Teresa couldn't slow down. There were too many people depending on her, too much work left to do. "I will rest when I die," she said. During her recovery, Mother Teresa made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She tried to resign as head of the missionaries of charity. "I am old and sick," she told her sisters. "You need younger, stronger leadership." But the missionaries of charity refused to accept her resignation. They knew that Mother Teresa wasn't just their leader. She was their inspiration, their example, their spiritual mother. So Mother Teresa continued working, even as her health deteriorated rapidly. In her final years, Mother Teresa opened new missions for AIDS patients, drug addicts, and homeless people. She spoke powerfully about protecting unborn children in her Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1979 and later addressed the United Nations on various humanitarian issues. In June 1997, just months before her death, she met with Princess Diana in the Bronx, New York. The encounter was widely photographed and documented. But privately, she was preparing for something she had been both dreading and anticipating for decades. On September 5, 1997, Mother Teresa died of cardiac arrest at the age of 87. She died in the same city where she had found her calling nearly 50 years earlier. The entire world mourned. Her funeral was attended by delegations from around 24 countries. Presidents, prime ministers, and dignitaries came to pay their respects to a woman who had chosen to serve the poorest of the poor. But the most moving part of her funeral wasn't the famous people who attended. It was the thousands of poor people from the slums of Calcutta who lined the streets to say goodbye to the woman who had loved them when no one else would. They called her Mother of the World, but to them, she was simply Mother. Chapter 7. The Eternal Light. Mother Teresa's death was the end of a remarkable life, but it was also the beginning of something even more extraordinary. The revelation of her spiritual darkness made her story even more powerful and inspiring. When her private letters were published after her death, the world learned the truth about her 50 years of spiritual emptiness. Many people were shocked. How could someone who seemed so close to God feel so abandoned by Him? But others understood that this revelation made Mother Teresa even more remarkable. She had served with perfect love while feeling no love herself. She had given hope to others while having no hope herself. She had been a light in the darkness while living in complete spiritual darkness. This paradox revealed the most important truth about Mother Teresa's life. Real love is not about how you feel. Real love is about what you do, especially when you don't feel like doing it. Mother Teresa proved that you don't need to feel God's presence to serve God. You don't need to feel love to love others. You don't need to feel hope to give hope. In 2016, Pope Francis officially declared Mother Teresa a saint of the Catholic Church. During the canonization ceremony, he said, "She made herself the voice of the voiceless and gave dignity back to those who had lost it." But Mother Teresa's true sainthood isn't in any official church declaration. It's in the millions of lives she touched and continues to touch. Today, the missionaries of charity continue her work in well over 100 countries worldwide. They run homes for orphans, hospices for dying people, centers for disabled children, and shelters for homeless families. Her influence extends far beyond the Catholic Church. People of all religions and no religion are inspired by her example of selfless service. Business leaders quote her wisdom about doing small things with great love. Politicians reference her commitment to serving the powerless. Healthcare workers follow her example of treating every patient with dignity. Her approach became encapsulated in a phrase now closely associated with her. The wisdom associated with her approach became summarized in words closely linked to her legacy. Do small things with great love. But perhaps her most important legacy is this. She proved that one ordinary person, armed with nothing but love and determination, can change the world. Mother Teresa wasn't born a saint. She became one through thousands of small acts of love, performed faithfully over decades, even when she felt nothing herself. She showed us that heroism isn't about grand gestures or perfect faith. Heroism is about showing up every day to serve others, especially when you don't feel like it. Your light begins to shine right now. Do you remember the questions I asked at the beginning of this story? Do you remember when I told you about someone who felt abandoned by God but became a symbol of divine love? Someone who felt spiritually empty but filled the world with meaning? Now you understand the incredible truth about Mother Teresa's transformation. She didn't succeed despite her spiritual darkness. She succeeded because she learned to serve others even in the darkness. Her emptiness became space for others' pain. Her doubts became empathy for others' struggles. Mother Teresa proved that your greatest weakness can become your greatest strength. Your deepest pain can become your most powerful tool for helping others. Your darkest moments can become the source of light for the world. Right now, as you listen to this story, you might be going through your own dark night of the soul. You might feel spiritually empty, emotionally drained, or completely lost. I want you to remember Mother Teresa's example. Remember the young woman who left everything she loved to serve others. Remember the nun who felt abandoned by God, but never abandoned the people who needed her. Remember the saint who found meaning not in feeling loved, but in choosing to love. You have the same capacity for love inside you right now. You have the same ability to transform suffering into service, darkness into light, emptiness into purpose. You don't need to feel perfect to do good. You don't need to have all the answers to help others. You don't need to feel God's presence to be God's hands in the world. Do small things with great love. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Your transformation into a force for good starts right now. The world is waiting for your light to shine. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of English Life Stories. I hope Mother Teresa's incredible journey from darkness to light inspired you as much as it inspired me when I first learned about her real struggles and triumphs. If this story touched your heart and opened your mind to new possibilities, please subscribe to our channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next transformative story. This story is based on documented historical facts, Mother Teresa's own writings, and verified testimonies from those who knew her. Some scenes have been dramatized for educational and narrative purposes while maintaining complete fidelity to the real events of her extraordinary life. See you next one.